A 3-3 homestand for the Milwaukee Brewers, who are now in a portion of the schedule where they maybe have a chance to get things going a little bit here after an up and down start. This is the Brewer Fanatic podcast. We'll be able to break it all down for you within the next couple of hours. Jack Stern and Spencer Michaelis hosting once again. We'll start with a question, actually. Uribe fan on Twitter asks, how's your guys' week going? You want to take that one first?
Oh, I would love to. And wow, what a thoughtful, nice question from one of our listeners. Yeah, my week's going well. I had a nice, really nice, relaxing weekend in Door County this past weekend, which was much needed. Get away from everything for a little bit. It has been very, very busy, really, until last week. And it was very nice to just get up there, not have much to do, not have to worry about anything. Of course, I was still watching the Brewers and also minor league games and everything else because I will never go away from that completely. But otherwise, no other responsibilities or anything else going on. So that was great. And then this week has been, again, still somewhat relaxing compared to what I had for a long time. So I'm in a good place. But Jack, how are you doing?
I'm tired. Road trip to Cleveland last week, come home. There was a day off in between, which was nice, but then come home, 6-game homestand. A lot of time at the ballpark. I still wouldn't trade it for anything, but it wears you down a little bit. So kind of happy that Milwaukee's back on the road now and I get a couple days to recuperate before they come back home. However, I do still have my responsibilities as an esteemed podcast host. So I guess we should dive into the action here. We'll start with the Brewers beginning their homestand against the red-hot Minnesota Twins. They would come to town and take the first two games of this series to extend their winning streak to 13 games. And once again, the Brewers were shut out in consecutive games. They were shut out in consecutive games in Cleveland, and then they came home and were shut out in consecutive games. So more really, really rough times for the offense. Brewers losing game 1, 3-0. Chad Patrick pitched like Chad Patrick again, but obviously if you get 0 runs of support, you are going to lose that game. There's really nothing else to talk about from that one. Game 2 we'll just jump into because there is something to unpack here. The Brewers losing this one 7-0. Tobias Myers got the start in this one. If you recall, he had been optioned to AAA, but then immediately bumped back into that rotation a couple days later because Jose Quintana had some issues after his last start with some shoulder inflammation. So Myers plugged back into that rotation and did not throw the ball very well at all. Or I shouldn't even say he didn't throw the ball. It just got hit really hard. He was in the strike zone a lot more. He didn't walk anybody in this start, which had been one of the issues for him that had led to that original demotion. But 3 2/3 for him, 11 hits, 4 earned runs, 4 strikeouts, and a homer. A lot of loud contact. I didn't put the numbers in here, but I know he was over 50% hard hit rate in this start. It was really, really bad. They were just teeing off on him. And honestly, pretty lucky that he got out of this one with 4 runs because with the kind of contact he was giving up, they probably could have scored twice as many runs while he was on the mound, but they didn't. You look at the 11 hits again as well. So we talked to him post-game about just what's been going on for him. What did he think the issue was tonight? And he did say right off the bat, he thought he threw the ball for the most part pretty well. And I don't necessarily disagree with that. Again, being in the strike zone a lot more. Yes, he caught a lot of plate, but I don't think people realize even last year, like how much Tobias Myers' approach was just living in the strike zone and even over the heart of the plate quite a bit and just not giving up the barrels. So he said tonight he was mostly happy with how he threw it. Maybe would take a couple of sliders back. The slider is the pitch that really got hit hard in this game as well. I think the average exit velo on it was like, if not over 100 miles an hour, it was pretty close. And that's the average exit velo. But the thing that he really pointed to is he said he felt he needed to mix speeds more than he did in this game. He said, everything that I threw tonight, and I'm paraphrasing, said everything I threw tonight was all basically in that same velo range. So fastball, cutter, slider. So like mid 80s to mid 90s, kind of in that 10 mile an hour range. He did start mixing a couple of curveballs in as the game got along a little bit. That was a pitch he pretty much ditched almost exclusively late last year. He threw more curveballs in the minor leagues coming up But really, the fastball slider thing is what started working for him really well last year when he took off. So he just kind of stuck with that. More curveballs in this one. We still really didn't see the changeup. And we're going to make this a pitch calling thing again because Pat Murphy has said after almost every Tobias Myers start that he feels that one of the issues is he's not throwing that changeup enough. Tobias Myers said after this start that he wants to throw his changeup more. So manager and player seem to be on the same page. But why is he not throwing more changeups? There's a missing party here, and naturally I'm going to look to the catcher. If William Contreras isn't calling changeups when the Brewers want more changeups and the pitcher wants more changeups, William Contreras should start calling more changeups. And I'm not saying that's for sure what's happening, but you look at two parties seem to be in on we need to throw this pitch more, and it's not being thrown more. Usually it's a little more obvious where you can point the blame. So I don't think that's going to fix every issue for him, though. Obviously, the command hasn't been good either. And I think some of this comes back to, you can't ask the catcher to call changeups if you're working behind almost every hitter you're facing. So I think that's part of it. But maybe in this outing, since he was in the strike zone, this is one where you could mix it in a little bit more. But what he talked about, like with the curveball too, is interesting to me because I do still like that pitch a decent amount for him. And a lot of times when you think of guys who throw from his slot, it usually is going to be more fastball, curveball, not fastball, slider because he's so straight over the top. And it'll be interesting to see if that's a pitch he starts incorporating into the arsenal a little bit more. He's going to have time to work on things now because he was optioned back down to AAA the following day after this start.
Yeah, I think the velo band thing is something I'd been noticing with him, and I should have looked at this beforehand, but I feel like there was more separation between the velo on the slider and the cutter last year. It feels like there was more of like a 4 to 5 mile per hour difference, and a lot of times this year it's been like 2 miles per hour when I've been watching. I've seen an 85, 86 cutter and then an 84 slider. Now that might be, sometimes that's just the pitch tracking, I'm sure, or the pitch tagging maybe messing with me a little bit, but I feel like the cutter was thrown harder last year, and maybe that's just me misremembering. I'm sure you're looking it up right now while I talk.
I'm looking it up right now.
But if that is the case, that makes it even more of a reason to mix in, like you just talked about, like he talked about, mix in the curveball as the other breaking ball more often, because that difference in velocity, I really don't think that gets talked about enough. I do believe that is a huge part of pitching and the pitch calling equation. If you are throwing, it doesn't matter how good your stuff is, timing is a huge part of what hitters are doing. And if they can just sit on a specific timing, that makes it easier for them to, one, if they are guessing to any extent, it makes it easier to guess because you have less room to have to adjust to anything that's thrown to you. But that's also just on the whole, it makes it more difficult to adjust to everything that's coming at you. So you've got a guy in Tobias who can get into the mid 90s. He's been more low 90s with his fastball this year. You've got the cutter, which helped him a lot last year to kind of help the fastball play up at times. We saw that when he returned. It was a good way to help it play up at times. But if you don't have, and this is what Tobias is talking about, if you don't have something that's in that low 80s or even in the upper 70s and everything just kind of sits in that same range,
There it is.
I can't see it super well, but yeah.
You see how the cutter
it is.
The cutter velo's down, so that's bringing the slider and the cutter closer.
Exactly. So yeah, it basically went from 4 to 2 in difference in velo, and that does make a difference. I mean, there's still a little bit of a different shape, obviously, with the slider and the cutter, but it does make a difference to only have a 2 mile per hour difference in the pitches. And in looking at this too, you can see there's actually more separation between the changeup and the curve from the fastball last year. Not a ton, again, mile per hour or two, but when you're talking about these things, like those miles per hour do matter. We talk about it with a guy like Brian Hudson, and like that 1 to 2 miles per hour can make a difference over the course of time. These other offerings, the changeup and the curveball, those give him actual slow pitches that aren't bad. Neither of them are bad pitches. The changeup performed really well last year. I don't know how it grades out stuff wise. Again, changeups are for me, one of the weirdest ones to look at for like Stuff Plus and everything. I don't know that it always captures it super well, but it performed well last year, the changeup. And yeah, it's just weird to me that it comes back to a lot of what we've talked about in the past with Contreras, where it feels like he just likes to go really heavy fastball. And not to be confused, Tobias was very good using a lot of fastballs last year, so I get it. But I do agree with him. I think there's a lot of logic in trying to change the velocity look at for hitters. And I think the easiest way to do that is with the changeup and the curveball, because they both have a much bigger difference. In fact, like you mentioned, the slider isn't really a pitch you would think he would throw super well from that super over the top slot. So if the cutter and slider are blending, I don't really see the need for both of them. Like, he doesn't need to throw both of them. If they're velocity wise, they're blending. I don't think the shape is a ton different. I think you could probably scrap the slider entirely and be fine and go to the other two pitches. And it's something I've been thinking about. I haven't really talked about, but yeah, it's like an 86 to 92 mile per hour velo range that hitters are mostly worried about right now with Tobias. And that's not enough for a hitter to be truly off balance at any point. So I'm glad he called it out. I'm glad Murph talked about it a little bit, but again, not to make it a big William Contreras thing, but you're right. When it seems like two people are on the same page and then there's a third party involved, it means the third party is probably the one who's not on the same page. So hopefully that means next time we see Tobias, some of these other pitches start getting mixed in. Hopefully when he pitches in Nashville, we start seeing the pitch mix start to change, because I think that's the best time to start to figure some things out. But it was a tough game for him. And yeah, he was in the zone, no walks, but 11 hits in 3 2/3 innings. I mean, guys are seeing the ball really, really well when that happens. And I think he has a good idea of what could maybe help change that going forward. So, yeah.
Game 3, the Brewers would snap the Twins' 13-game winning streak, winning this one by a final of 5-2. Freddie Peralta, a lot of deep counts again for him, not putting guys away super efficiently, but gutting through 5 innings, only giving up the 1 run, 3 hits, a walk, and 5 strikeouts. The big moment in this one was Jackson Chourio robbing what would have been a game-tying home run from Royce Lewis in the 8th inning off of Nick Mears. More on Nick Mears as we continue going here into the show. But Jackson Chourio's caught a lot of heat for some misplays in center field. And we talked about it last week because we were talking about those misplays. Like, he has said that center field is his most comfortable position because he can read the ball best there. I've asked Pat Murphy about it. Pat Murphy has said that they believe center field is the position he's most comfortable at because he can read the ball out there. You watched him play a lot of center field in the minor leagues, and you felt good about him.
Mm-hmm.
He's a good athlete. For as bad as some of those misplays have been, and also, even though the sample's really small and it doesn't mean a whole lot, like, the metrics have liked him in center field too so far in that very small sample. Like, I think for the most part, he had been, even going into this game, a passable center fielder, even considering those misplays. I think he still tracked down quite a few balls pretty well that, if you're watching on TV, it's just not going to stand out to you, and you're just going to remember the misplays. Like, I think he's got it in him to be a good center fielder, and then he goes out and he makes a play like this, which, if you watch the full replay, like, really, really clean route that he took on this ball to get to this one. So this is what he's capable of out there. So it was nice to see him have this big moment, given some of the hiccups that he's experienced out there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was in the car on the way home from Door County listening to this game, so I saw the play a little bit later. But first of all, fantastic call on the radio. I believe it was Lane Grindle. But seeing the replay, I mean, like you said, fantastic route. Pretty much the only route you could take to get to that ball. When you don't have time to, like, chop your feet or set yourself up to rob a homer, meaning you don't have time to, like, jump off 2 feet, or, again, just at least slow down and give yourself, like, a nice runway to jump. Those are always incredible catches. And he didn't get super high off the ground, because you can't when you're sprinting full speed at the wall. And that makes it even more impressive. I mean, he barely gets the glove over the wall. not to mention, maybe the most impressive part of the entire catch is holding on to the ball when your arm hits the wall like that. Like when your glove is over the wall turned, it's very easy to have that impact hit your arm and kind of vibrate the ball right out the end of the glove. And it didn't happen. I mean, that was one of the better home run robberies I've seen from a Brewers outfielder, and there are quite a few good ones to look at over the years. That was an extremely impressive play. And then, like you said, he's actually just digging a little deeper into the defensive stuff. I was looking the other day, and Churio's getting good jumps in center field. To me, it looks like a guy who's now just not trusting that he actually did get a good read on the ball. Like he is reading the ball correctly off the bat, and then he's second guessing himself. And I think that goes into something we've been seeing in general. I think there's a little bit more of a hesitation to his game. I think there's a little bit more thinking going on than we saw during his best stretches last year, where he might just be overthinking things. And I'm sure we'll touch on it a little bit in the Orioles series, but there were a couple plays where he just didn't go all out for him when it looked like he probably could have got to a ball too. And to me, I think it's just more of a mental thing. I do not think it's a problem with his ability to play center field. And I stand by what we said last week. I still think he's going to end up being pretty good out there. And in reality, he's been fine. And he could probably even look even better if he didn't have those few moments of just kind of second guessing his read and second guessing himself and costing himself some outs that he probably knows he should have got to. But overall, it's been good. And that home run robbery was one of the better plays I've seen for many Brewers center fielders. So I think he'll be fine long-term still.
I think that's also a play where we've talked so much about how the Brewers have struggled to get going. They have like these little moments where it feels like they're starting to look more like themselves, and then it comes crashing right back down again. This is a play that I'm not saying it will, but if there is a play that can finally push a group over the hump,
Yeah.
it is a play like this, because you imagine what the alternative is. Minnesota ties it with that home run. Say the Brewers go on to lose. You get swept at home coming off of that rough road trip. Like the difference between that feeling and then the feeling of coming out of that game with a win, with a huge play from a guy who had been in the middle of some of those rough losses. Like the ability that a play like that has to potentially turn things around, like that. This feels like the moment where, if things turn around, this is the play you come back to. And it, going into that Orioles series, then you take 2 out of 3 there. Would have been nice to get a sweep, but a bad team came to town and you won the series against them, which is what you need to do. So going into that Orioles series, I guess, kind of coming off of that point, the Brewers taking the first 2 from Baltimore before dropping game 3. Game 1, Milwaukee winning 5-4. William Contreras was the story in this one. He's playing through that broken finger, but he's back to hitting the ball really, really hard again, which is a good sign. That had been the issue for him so far this year. That was explainable by that middle finger fracture. The fact that he just wasn't hitting the ball with the same authority that he usually does. But he reached base all 5 times in this one, recorded 4 hits. All of them were over 100 miles an hour out the bat. Like, really good stuff from him. On the pitching side, Rob Zastryzny opened for Quinn Priester because Baltimore has a lot of good lefties in the top half of that order. So they went with Rob Zastryzny, who is back, by the way. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the show. But it's a good thing for the Brewers that he's back, and we'll touch on that later. So Zastryzny, perfect first inning for him. And then Quinn Priester coming out, going 5 1/3, 4 hits, 3 earned runs, a walk and 2 strikeouts. The one walk was big for me to see because another guy who had been struggling to be in the strike zone consistently. Unfortunately, that walk came in his final inning that he started, and things got a little bumpy. So we talked about how Nick Mears nearly gave up a game-tying home run in that Twins game. Nick Mears did give up a game-tying home run in this game because he was back out there again. Cedric Mullins hitting that one off of him. However, William Contreras once again coming up and getting that 4th and final hit. It was a game-winning RBI single in the bottom of the 8th, so the Brewers ending up on top in this one, 5-4. Game 2, Brewers 5, Orioles 2. finally we started to see a little bit of home run power from the Brewers, which had been seriously missing from their game has been for most of the season. Bryce Terang homering, Sal Frelick homering. Frelick in his first at-bat just missed one, and then in his second at-bat hit his farthest home run of his career at 412 feet to the second deck, a no-doubter for Sal Frelick. And Rhys Hoskins as well, adding a homer late for some insurance. Logan Henderson got the start in this one, his third big league outing. Once again, really good stuff from him. 5 innings, shutout innings at that. 2 hits allowed, 2 walks, 7 Ks. But even the 7 Ks, I think, underscores how tough he looked to hit in this one. 20 whiffs for him in this start, which was it is the most by a Brewers starting pitcher this year in an outing. Freddie Peralta had 19 a little while back, but 20 for Logan Henderson in this one, so the most that a Brewer has gotten in an appearance in 2025 so far. Tyler Alexander coming out of the bullpen and was seemingly in a position to eat up 2 innings, and you're in a good spot. Had 3-0. Can finish it off. Hopefully, just those final 2 innings there. But Pat Murphy going to Yoel Payamps with 2 outs in the 7th and a 3-0 lead. Runner on first. Things got a little hairy after that because Payamps gave up a single to Arias, and then you had that left-handed top of the order coming up for Baltimore. Payamps had to face them. Jackson Holliday hit a triple. Then he gets out of the inning, but now it's 3-2, making that Hoskins insurance home run all the more critical. I'm not going to dive into this too much right now because we've got some bullpen talk coming up. Game 3 is where a lot of it really comes into play here. Orioles 8, Brewers 4, but the Brewers actually had a lead for a good chunk of this one, a close lead at that. Rhys Hoskins homering in back-to-back games. He's been super hot. We're not going to talk about him too much on the show, but I talked to him about some of the changes he's made to his load. I talked to him during the homestand, wrote a story on it at Brewer Fanatic if you want to go read that. If you have not yet checked it out, really good stuff from him, basically just on how he's got his legs back, how his timing's in a better spot because he simplified his load. The leg kick is gone. Good stuff from him. Unfortunately, Nick Mears, once again, kind of right at the middle of this whole thing. Pitching for the 3rd time in 4 days, Pat Murphy asks him to go 2. He works a spotless 7th. Things don't go well in the 8th, gives up 2. Again, Yoel Payamps in the middle of that as well. Baltimore takes the lead in the 8th. Caleb Durbin would hit a game-tying RBI in the 9th to take the Brewers to extras, and by the time this game is continuing, goes into the 11th eventually, Tyler Alexander just has to pitch, even though he probably shouldn't. He had thrown over 30 pitches the night before in that Game 2 appearance, so predictably did not do so well. I don't think you can really fault him for anything that happened in that inning because, he no matter what he's going to say, and he said he felt fine, like, good chance that guy he was not feeling super crisp, did not have the best stuff. So things did not go well for him. Baltimore pulls away and wins this one 8-4. We'll preface this before we jump into it by saying that far and away, the reason the Brewers are not winning games like they should be is because they can't hit. And that's, there's nothing that Pat Murphy can do to change the fact that they can't hit. That's not his fault. That said, we are going to have to talk about some bullpen stuff. We've talked about Pat Murphy and bullpen stuff plenty of times on this show, and we've been able to stay from it away from it a little bit this year so far. But it just was not good in this series, and it's the familiar issues, basically just running the top relievers into the ground. And this is really one of the moments where he actually got dealt some pretty immediate repercussions for doing so. And that was the one thing that we didn't really see last year. We kind of kept spending a lot of time last year saying this is going to catch up to him. This is going to catch up to him. And it never really did. This is one of the first moments where you can see, like, yeah, it caught up to him, the way that he went about it. So again, it was really the Nick Mears thing, but you're going into this Game 3 against the Orioles. It is the 4th straight game that's been in which you're holding a very close lead in the late innings, in the middle innings, and in the late innings. Chad Patrick did not help out by just generally not being very efficient. He couldn't complete that fifth inning. So Murphy going to Rob Zastryzny to finish that inning. Rob Z gets out of it, comes back out for the sixth, runs into some trouble. Grant Anderson comes in, retires 2 righties on 4 pitches, inning over. And I think this is now where you can kind of start saying, okay, things had to be a little bit different here. Nick Mears, again, pitching in his 3rd game in 4 days, and I believe his 4th game in 6 days as well, and his 21st game in the 40 days at that point he had been on the active roster. So pitching over half the days that he was on the roster. And I get it. Like the Brewers are always in these close situations because they can't score more runs and pull away.
Yes.
That is the offense's fault. Pat Murphy can't change that. What I keep coming back to is Pat Murphy gets dealt a lot of tough situations because of just the team that he's got. But it seems like when you throw Pat Murphy into a tough situation where there's no great solution, he's more likely to do something that makes a bad situation even worse than he is to do something that helps you find a way to just get through it, even if it's not super comfortable or things don't go great, but you can kind of come out on the other side and say, okay, well, at least like, guys are fresh. Like we're not in a bad spot. It feels like he's going to do something aggressive that compounds some issues you've already got. And I think that's what happened here. So he asks Nick Mears for 2 innings, 3 out of 4, with as heavy as the workload has been. Like you just can't do that. You can't do that. And he did it. It didn't work. But really what's striking is he does this. Look, this entire Brewers bullpen worked really hard in these first few games. And I don't think there was anything wrong really with the way he played those first even 2 games of the series here, because at that time, because of those blowouts, those losses you had against the Twins, going in, for the most part, going into that Baltimore series, your A guys were in okay shape as far as workload goes. So yeah, push them in push them in game 3 against the Twins, push it a little bit those first 2 Baltimore games. That's fine. But then when you get to game 3, you need to take a look at this and you need to say, Abner Uribe has pitched a ton. Trevor McGill has pitched a ton. Nick Mears has pitched a ton. Basically, the Grant Anderson had hardly pitched. So Grant Anderson, good shape. Believe he hadn't pitched since Saturday. I should really have the chart up in front of me. I might pull it up really quick here while I'm talking, because if you go to roster resource, that's where they have like pitch counts and when everybody pitched and all that kind of stuff. But basically, the 2 guys you had in that bullpen who should have been fully good to go, Grant Anderson, set to eat up some outs for you in game 3, and Easton McGee, who the Brewers selected from Nashville leading into this series for the purpose of being like your fresh arm who can give you a little bit of length when you need it. So you're going into this game 3 against the Orioles. Trevor McGill available for this game because this game was 3 out of 4 for him. So I think it was okay to use him. But Uribe, 3 in a row. Nick Mears, like we said, this was going to be, he had pitched a lot lately, not in a good spot. Jared Koenig had gone 3 in a row, so he's down. Grant Anderson, 3 days off going into this game. Easton McGee had not pitched in like a week. That was the last time he had thrown for Nashville. So Easton McGee and Tyler and Grant Anderson, basically, you should have gone into this game saying, unless we get a really long start from Chad Patrick, these 2 guys are just going to have to pitch.
Yep.
And I understand why he didn't feel great about using them, because it's not a great situation for either one of those guys the way this game unfolded. It's a close game. Pat Murphy said post-game, Easton McGee hadn't pitched in the big leagues in 2 years, and in a perfect world, you don't want to throw him into a leverage spot in his first outing back. Completely get that. There's nothing wrong with that belief. And he didn't say this about Grant Anderson. He didn't talk about Grant Anderson. But, Grant Anderson's very much got that really effective against righties profile. Gets a little iffy against lefties sometimes because of the slot and the stuff and the way his pitches work and the way they look. Orioles have a lot of pretty good left-handed bats in that order. Like, I get it. However, you've won 2-3. You've won the first 2 games of this series. You got to be thinking about Pittsburgh, which is coming up next. You don't have a Thursday off day this week like you did last week. You're going straight into Pittsburgh. You have a 4-gamer there that you have to get through and then come back home. Like, you got to be looking at the status of the rest of your bullpen and be thinking to yourself, like, I can't manage this one very aggressively. It's just to pace your bullpen out. There are days where you just got to say it's not a good spot for either one of them, but assuming we don't get a deep start from Chad Patrick, Easton McGee has to eat at least 1 inning in this game, maybe 2. You know,
Yep.
what's the pocket of the game that we can pick out for him where it's not great, but maybe this is like relative to when he could be used. This is like the quote unquote best time to use him, but slide him through here for 3 to 6 outs. Let's get more out of Grant Anderson. I think where this started to go off the rails is when he only let Grant Anderson throw 4 pitches and record 2 outs. I think Grant Anderson, matchups be damned. You had the top of the order with those lefties coming up after that, but Grant Anderson's fresh. You got to get more than 4 pitches and 2 outs from him. You just have to with the way the bullpen's shaping up. Or another way to play this is Rob Z gets that final out for Patrick, and then you just go to Easton McGee and say, hey, you got to eat 2 innings here. Like, just got to find a way through it. It's still early enough in the game where if it doesn't go well, you know, maybe we can come back. Like, but you have to use one of those guys, and he didn't do it. He went really aggressive with the way he used the bullpen again. And when you're doing that, even if they win that game, you're going into Pittsburgh now in a spot where it's not amazing, or you're going into Pittsburgh in a spot where Easton McGee's got to eat innings anyway in the next game. Like, and by doing it the way he did it, he ran the risk of a double whammy. And that being, it doesn't work for Myers, and you lose this game, and now Nick Myers is down for most of that Pittsburgh series. And Easton McGee had to get sent back down now because he ended up having to pitch an extra innings. It's just a whole big thing that went on here. And I'm not going to say that, you know, they very well could have gone into extra innings if Easton McGee pitched, because maybe Easton McGee lets them tie the game. Like, that's very easily something that could have happened. And then there's nothing Murphy can do about it. But just from a process standpoint, like, this stuff can't keep happening, and it keeps happening. And we'll get into, you know, we're not going to talk about the Pirates series. We were originally going to recap game 1, but they got delayed, and we had to start going through this so that we weren't recording at, 2:30 in the morning. But in large part because of the way Pat Murphy played this game with his bullpen, they had to bring a starter back prematurely from his rehab assignment so that he could start the next day. They scratched Aaron Savali, who was supposed to make what would probably have been his final rehab start on Wednesday night. They had to scratch him at the last minute, bring him to Pittsburgh, and he had to all of a sudden go back to starting big league games when he hadn't pitched in the big leagues since March 30th. And you could tell he did not look super sharp in this return start, but actually credit to him for finding a way to just kind of gut through 4 innings. You could tell that the command was not great for him. Walked a couple guys, hit a guy, some deep counts for him, just not looking the sharpest, but he found a way to get through it against a bad Pirates lineup. But like, this just can't keep happening. And like I said, I think he got away with it a lot last year, but this is really one of the first moments where you're seeing it come back to bite him. And in the game before too, like, so he said post-game that Alexander was nearing the end of his leash there, which I kind of get. He was over 30 pitches, and that had been, let's see, full 3 out of 5 for him, or 3 out of 6. I'm not looking at the matrix right now, so more than he's used to. But man, again, I'm just thinking, okay, that better be the rationale, and not we need Yoel Payamps to face Ramon Urias in his mid 600s OPS when he's not the tying run. Because if that's what it is, then that's not, like, it just, the win tonight thing, it seems like he gets so aggressive with this stuff and almost overthinks it a little bit too. Like, sometimes you just need to go into a game with, this is just how we're going to play it.
Yep. Yeah. We talked about it last year. The win tonight thing is a great way to approach how you talk about things in front of your players, how you have the minds. You want your players to have that mindset every single day. So you want to have your messaging to them be about winning tonight. You cannot manage a 162 game season with that motto in your head every single night. You just can't. It's going to come back and bite you. You have to have the bigger picture in mind sometimes. And when you look at, I'll go back to game 2 first, because I was at that game and we texted each other right when he started taking Alexander out. And we were like, is there really a good reason for this? Like, I don't see a good reason to do this. He wants, he didn't say Alexander was at the end of his pitch limit, we should note. He said he was nearing his pitch limit, which to me means you've got 2 outs. Go get one. You give him one batter. If Urias reaches, then fine. Now the tying run is at the plate. I get it. Now you're going to make a pitching change. I understand. Now,
and then at that point, it should probably be Koenig, not
yes,
Payams.
that's what I was going to say. I would have had Koenig getting ready to face the top of the order full of lefties. The Payams move is back in 2017. It would have been a fine move because you could have thrown him against Urias, and then you could have gone, all right, now we go to our lefty. And they probably would have had an extra bullpen guy back then, because you had more roster flexibility with those types of things. Like, there was more stuff you could do back then. It doesn't work now. And not to mention, I mean, Payams he had a good stretch leading into the last week or so, but it's not like I was fiending for him to get back into a leverage role. And this was kind of a leverage spot where he was going to face the top of the order if Urias reached in any way. So that one on its own was, I'd say, interesting at best. And, now he has to face a few hitters. It makes it harder for him to be available the next day. So he ended up pitching, obviously, but these are the types of things that can continue to kind of spiral and build on each other, because now it's another guy who, if you don't use Payams there, he would have been someone who was rested for the next game. So that's where I look at it and I'm like, there's no big picture thinking there. There's no what happens tomorrow, which I don't want to ramble too much here, but like, the next day is a day game as well, which makes it even harder for guys to bounce back who pitched the night before, because there's less recovery time. Like, there's a quicker turnaround to the next game. That's why you don't see catchers catch night game to day game usually, because it's hard to bounce back that quickly. So it's the same thing for relievers. So you are already limiting yourself. And then game 3, I mean, you touched on everything I would have touched on. I don't need to rehash all of it, but to me, it's just, I know people don't like Craig Counsell. Believe me, I am not a fan of Craig Counsell, but Craig Counsell was extremely good at this, and people didn't like him for it. He was willing to, Easton McGee would have pitched, and he would have pitched probably in that 6th or 7th inning, and he might have pitched 2 innings, and he might have given up a run and let the game become tied, and Craig Counsell wouldn't have batted an eye at it. And that's because he knew that for the greater good of the bullpen and their health and moving forward, that he just had to do that. And I guess one thing I would give in the other direction is that a lot of times Craig Counsell obviously was dealing with a team that was in a good spot record-wise. So he probably didn't feel as much pressure in a spot like this to go like, oh, we could get a sweep. We've been struggling. Like, this could be 4 in a row. I'm sure some of that factored into Murph in this situation. But then again, we look back at last year and other times this year. I don't know if that played a huge role here. I think this is just kind of the way he operates. And the best way I can describe this, and I think it's fair to Pat Murphy, because this is what he's known for. He manages like he's managing college baseball. And it's a different mindset at the college level. Like, you are trying to win every single game, and especially conference games. And it's easier to kind of build your bullpen around because you don't play every day and you don't play nearly as many games. So like, this type of mindset is great for college. And it's something, as college coaches, we employ for the most part. Now, we're still going to take care of our pitchers, but win today is our mindset every time we play a game when we are coaching college baseball. It cannot be like that in a 162 game season. It just can't. And like Jack said, we didn't see it come back to bite him much last year. I would say there's one clear-cut example of somebody that Brian Hudson, it hurt Brian Hudson. I'm pretty comfortable saying that messed with Brian Hudson a little bit last year. I'm not saying it carried into this season. I think there was some other stuff that's going on this year, but Brian Hudson fell off a cliff, and he was used at an insane rate early in the season for a guy who was not used to that. He had basically passed his innings from the previous year by the time we were hitting late June, I believe. So it's one of those things where I worry that that's starting to happen a little bit with Nick Mears as I watch him go out there. And I worry that it's just, I think he's toned down the Grant Anderson usage, but
now too much.
But now he's too much.
Now he's not. He went from using Grant Anderson 7 times in 10 days, and now Grant Anderson's just not pitching.
Right. So it's weird. And I pulled it up now, and one of these players is no longer on the Brewers, but the Brewers have 3 relievers in the top 10 for games this year. Uribe, who didn't miss much time, but he was suspended the first 4 games of the season. Jared Koenig and Pyamps are all in the top 10 in appearances this season. And then Nick Mears, who missed an entire, he was on the IL to start the year.
He was on the 15 day. So he
was on the 15 day.
It was at least the first 2 weeks.
Right. And to paint the picture here, 23 puts you in the top 10. 23 appearances is what Pyamps had. That was number 10. Mears is at 21 while missing 15 games. So that's another one. You've got, I believe, Anderson is also right in that. Yeah, he's at 21 as well. And he was in the minors for a portion of the season to start the year, if I recall correctly. Did he not miss? He didn't make the opening day roster, right?
No, he was in the minors for probably like a week.
Yeah. So,
we should know. Okay, so Mears, they did retro Mears. They could do it by 3 days.
Okay.
Because it was an opening day.
Right.
So he was activated on April 8th.
Yes.
So it would have been, I believe that's just short of 2 weeks, but still, it doesn't do a whole lot to change the timeline. I just want to make sure we're getting it right.
Yeah. So that's 5 guys who are all within 2 games of the top 10 in appearances right now. And the 2 that aren't in the top 10 missed at least a week or 2 weeks. That's too much usage for your top guys. And you just can't do that to them. And Pyamps, I was not one of the top guys. I should clarify, like, he fell out of the leverage role pretty early on this year, and using him as much as he did, knowing that they were kind of trying to get him back on track, knowing that he actually was coming in non-leverage spots like that, I don't mind that type of usage for guys like that. I think there's a role for people like that. I think Hobie Milner could fill that role because he had a bit of a rubber arm as well. Like, and I should note, I think Anderson has a little bit of that going on, where I think he can bounce back really well. And he is one of those guys who, if he is in the top 10 in appearances, it's like, yeah, that makes sense. Like, he doesn't throw super hard. He's got that lower slot, which kind of helps some of the pressure and the amount of tension that goes into the elbow. But the other guys, that's not the case. And again, it's hard. I think a lot of times the response I get the most on Twitter when I say something about this is that, like, well, if McGee gave up the runs, you would have said something too. And I'll say it right. I would not have. I wouldn't have said a word about it, because I think what Jack and I are trying to hammer home when we talk about this, as much as we do, is that it's all about the process. And when you look at just the results, yeah, you can question managers a lot if you are worried about what happened on the results and you don't even think about what led to them making that decision. But you have to look at it through a process. And that doesn't mean we're right about what the process should be on every single situation. We have different opinions than Pat Murphy on things. Some of this is opinion based, but this type of stuff, overworking people, I think this is much more cut and dry. And I think these types of situations, it's just, frankly, he handled it wrong, and he's been handling it wrong a decent amount this year. You have to trust a guy like Easton McGee to just go out and pitch. And for me, if you are on the big league roster and I'm the manager, I have to be able to put you into a game. Otherwise, why are we on the big league roster?
And
so you have to trust
that.
I know, right? I know
he
did
said it. He said it the entire homestand. Almost every post game, he was saying, bullpens work pretty hard. Got to be able to trust all 8 guys down there. But then the way he manages, he doesn't.
Right.
He says that you got to be able to use all 8 guys and trust 8 guys, but then he keeps using the same 5.
Yeah. And I think that is where, to circle it all back together, and I said I didn't want to ramble, and I have absolutely been rambling now, but to circle it back, that is where the win today thing, I think, just gets in his own head. Like, to take it back, I'm not going to go all the way through it again, but like the Rays thing, when we talked about McGill coming in with 2 outs, like I think in his head, he's thinking, man, if I don't use McGill here and we lose this game, I didn't use my closer, which means I didn't go out and try to win that game no matter what. And I think that causes not panic moves, but over management, and it's overthinking. Like Jack said, it's doing more than you need to do. It's kind of inserting yourself into the game as the manager, which in all reality, you should be inserting yourself into the game as little as possible as a manager of a baseball game. Like, you should be doing the things that help push your team in the right direction, but your moves are not the ones that are going to flip the script on a game positively, very rarely. I think they flip them negatively if you do things wrong, but I think one single move a manager makes is very rarely going to completely flip the game in a positive direction for the team. I do think it can go the other way, though. So that's really where I'm trying to go with this. Jack doesn't have to agree with all of that, but for me, that is what I see when I look at this. And it's why when we question this type of stuff, that's the rationale behind it, is that we don't agree with the process of it. We don't think that is the correct way to handle this situation. And whether it worked or not, we probably would have had a similar conversation here. Even if they won this game, I'm pretty sure we would have been talking about the way this was handled, because we were talking about it well before the game was decided yesterday. So again, this is not a results-based thing. It is a process-based thing. And I think that's the thing I want to hammer home here.
And that's why I want to point out too, like he's had moments since we started talking about this last year where he did do it the right way, and he'd start using just the lower leverage guys when you're down by 1 or 2 or whatever. Like, go back to the last homestand. Like, I give him, and he caught some heat for this, but this is the one I think he did right that people disagree. Like, he used Elvin Rodriguez when they were down by a couple to eat a bunch of innings, and the game got away from them because Elvin Rodriguez just hasn't been a big league quality pitcher when he's been up here. But he played that one the right way. Like, that's what you just need to do sometimes. So do more of that. Just do it a little more consistently. Show me that you've got a consistent process for this. Because, okay, look, I'm in the room for home games, at least, like every day with Pat Murphy. Talk to him pregame, talk to him postgame. And multiple of us, we ask questions about this kind of stuff. And when you ask him the question, he almost always, ask him a question about anything, really. He will almost always give you a very thoughtful, well thought out answer where you leave the room with this vibe of he's a big league manager. He's thinking about all kinds of stuff, and he's got a really good understanding of the game. Like, he knows what he's doing. And then sometimes you get into a game and he'll do things that sometimes fly in the face of what he'll say in that setting, which makes you think like he knows. But I think it does seem to be, and I'm not saying for sure, I'm not inside Pat Murphy's head, but it does seem like in the moment, once you put him into that game situation, just he's so competitive, so fiery. And I think a lot of that comes from the college background. Like, we're D3 for us is not nearly the same as D1, and I'm not going to pretend it is. But like college games in general, it is like tooth and nail. Like, you got to squeeze everything you can out of everybody. Every game, you need to treat it like just a battle. Like, it's got to be 110%. But the schedule also allows you to do that.
Yep.
This is the big league. It's so much different, and you can't let that get in the way of the way that you would plan things out when you're sitting in your office and you're looking at, the availability and all this stuff. Like, you can't let the game setting deter you from that, because this is Major League Baseball. There's a lot of things you got to think about. It's 162, and over 162, if the process that you thought out before you stepped on the field in game one, if that's a really good process, really thorough, really prepared, all this stuff, if you adhere to it, usually, and you have good players, obviously, usually things are going to go well. It's going to work. But if you get into the game setting and, all of a sudden there's a potential win in front of you and the win tonight thing takes over in his head and he's like, nope, we got to do this here. Like, okay, let's calm down a little bit. By the way, I know we said we weren't going to talk, and we're not going to break down the whole Pirates game, but it just ended as we were talking about this. So Carlos Rodriguez got into some trouble in the ninth, and he used Trevor McGill for the fourth time in 5 days to get the save. Grant Anderson did not pitch.
And they're
like right on cue, man. It's like what exactly is the plan for the rest of this series now? Like you can't use
Anderson
Trevor McGill 4 times in 5 days. Especially in the middle of this stretch where like they didn't get an off day this week.
Yeah.
Like you can't do that. And you had a guy who could pitch. Just use like the rain delay obviously threw some things off in this one. But again, like Savali had to start this game largely because of the way Pat Murphy used the bullpen in that final game of that Orioles series. In a perfect world, it's the plan going into this one should have been Savali and Rodriguez. If those guys can't get you all the way home, then Anderson pitches.
Yep.
The rain delay obviously screwed it up quite a bit for Rodriguez, and there's nothing Murphy could have done about that. That's not his fault.
Nope.
And the sending him back out after the delay, that's something that I think they had to do. I'm sure, if you keep a guy moving and you keep the arm warm, it's not an ideal situation, but I think there's a way you can make it work where he can go back out there and throw a few more pitches. Looking at the box score, it looks like I think they stretched him too far after that. I think he probably should have been pulled sooner than he was. Because the way I would think of it is if you keep him moving, keep him warm, maybe he can go out and throw like 20 more, 30 more. Looks like they tried to ride it out with him to finish this game, which I think, again, should have been the original plan. But maybe once that rain hits, you got to start expecting more out of Anderson. Rob Zastryzny, though, pitched in this game for the third time in 4 days. Like, that's not an egregious one. But again, it's like, do you have to do that? You don't have to do that. How about you roll with Rodriguez first? And again, you see how far those first two guys can get you. If the rain hits and you got to cut Rodriguez short, it's unfortunate. Couldn't do anything about that. Go from there. But like, again, see what you can get out of those first two guys. And then depending on how many outs are left, see how much Anderson can give you. And then maybe Zastryzny if you need him. Not you go to Zastryzny right after for a clean inning too, by the way.
Yep.
Like, and then McGill pitches in 4 out of 5. Like it just you can't keep doing this, man. And it's I know we've spent a lot of time on this, so I don't want to keep going. And I still firmly like there are still way more good things you can say about Pat Murphy than bad things.
Yeah.
But like, man, you can't keep doing this, and I think someone has to say it. And if me, especially in the business of like, they pay me to give analysis of this team. So that's what I'm going to do. And just from someone who is paid to analyze baseball and is looking at process-based stuff like this, like if I'm going to be honest both ways, good or bad, this is bad. You can't keep doing this. This is going to blow up in your face. And I don't know if anyone's had a conversation. And maybe it like Pat Murphy is not solely responsible for every decision either. Like if like there are guys on the bench who he said helps give him input for these. So I don't know what that process looks like, but like whatever the reason for this happening, it can't keep happening. He's gotta back off a little bit. And like, I get it. He's been put in last year too, put in a lot of tough spots by injuries, tough starts. I get it. I don't think that's an excuse though, for just not using your entire bullpen in a little more of a balanced way. Sometimes you just got to bite the bullet, and that's how you have to do it. And guess what? Like, generally speaking,
it'll still work.
Just take a step back and do the math here. What's the league average OBP? Like 315?
Yeah.
And even if you're throwing out B bullpen guy who has a 4.5 ERA, like, generally speaking, more often than not, you're going to make it out okay. Even if it's not a perfect, like absolutely, there are going to be times where you have to do it and it doesn't work. And you kind of just got to throw your hands up and say, all right, well, I mean, that's just kind of how we had to play it and it didn't work, but at least we're in a good spot moving forward. But at the same time, like we would see Counsell do this all the time. Like he would throw that guy out there and it would work. It would go okay.
Yes.
The game would not fall apart. A lot of times they still ended up winning the game. Not every time, but like, you just got to have more of that big picture approach. And I don't think it hasn't been consistently as bad as it was early last year. but it's still a thing. And if it's still a thing, we got to talk about it.
Yes.
And we spent a lot of time talking about it.
The final point here, but like you mentioned, it still works a decent amount of the time when the B bullpen goes out there, or even the C pen. It doesn't always, it's not a guaranteed win to throw your A pen out there. We saw that in this game. Like that doesn't guarantee you the win either. So like once you start to kind of crunch the odds on both ends of the spectrum, there's still a pretty decent chance either way it's going to work out. And obviously, when everybody's healthy and everybody's available and everybody's in a good spot in terms of usage, then you use your A pen in these types of games. But when it's not, you just have to go to the other side of things and use an Easton McGee, use Grant Anderson a little bit more, use anybody like it. You just have to do it. And yeah, we need to be done with it. But it is funny that this game even had a nice example to tie into it to end this thing here, because yeah, it does need to change. It definitely needs to change.
Let's go to our next topic now. Andre Monasterio has been playing more shortstop lately, and this is one of the things that I asked Pat Murphy about a couple times on the last homestand. Like, they were in Cleveland. He started 2 out of 3 games at short at Cleveland. On this homestand as well, there were multiple instances where Joey Ortiz was pinch hit for late. Monasterio comes in to play shortstop to finish the game. And I asked Pat Murphy, like, he's been over there quite a bit since you called him up. And the first question I asked was, we were talking about Joey Ortiz. And I said, so you guys had, because you had Durbin, you guys had the ability to send down Dunn when you felt he would just benefit from minor league at-bats. Has it hurt you that you haven't necessarily had a guy behind Joey that's allowed you to do that for Joey? Because he's just kind of had to play every day, even as things have been really, really rough for him. And let's be honest, like, Joey Ortiz could use, I think, a AAA reset. But for most of the season, you didn't have a guy behind him on the depth chart. And Murphy's response to that question was, well, that's why it's nice that we have Monasterio up here now. And then that night was one of the nights where Monasterio finished the evening at shortstop. And look, Pat Murphy, every time we've asked about Joey Ortiz, he's said that he thinks Joey Ortiz is going to figure it out. He's seeing some good signs. But then you look at the way the in-game management is, and what he's saying, like that's what you should say. Express confidence in a player.
Yeah.
Like, that's how you handle it. But you look at like how the playing time is shaking out now, and Monasterio got another start at short in that Baltimore series. Like, it really seems to me like the Brewers are laying the groundwork. I think there's already been a little bit of a shift where they're like, we're not going to play Joey at short every single day anymore. But I think they're also laying the groundwork a little bit for, if we really do need to send him down, can Andre Monasterio handle shortstop for a couple of weeks? And Pat Murphy said they believe he can play there. And Spencer, I know you're not a fan of his glove, but I actually think he's looked better over there than he largely had at third base when he was playing third base in the big leagues.
I would agree with that. He has surprised me with the defense at short. I watched him a decent amount over there in Nashville, and it wasn't very good, but I think he's very comfortable going to his glove side. Anytime I see him moving to his arm side to the right, it looks weird to me and not quite right. And he doesn't exactly have a great arm, so obviously that's going to make it difficult going that direction too. But he's been very good going up the middle, coming in on the ball. He's looked pretty good in his time there. So I think he could handle it if they have to go that direction. Now, obviously, Joey Ortiz did smoke a home run in this game that happened today, and 109 off the bat, his hardest hit ball of the game or of the season. So hopefully a sign of some things starting to figure itself out. I mean, now he's hit 2 homers in the last week or so. But I think you're absolutely correct that at the very least, they're trying to give it a look and see if this is a way that if Ortiz doesn't figure it out soon, I'm sure they're still trying to give that room to play with. Otherwise, he'd already be down. But I think they are feeling at this point like, yeah, we're playing Monasterio there like once in a while anyway. Why couldn't he do this for 2 weeks while we try and get Ortiz back on track in AAA? Let him work through some mechanical things. Like, that's the easiest thing to do down there, is to, if you're going to change a swing and you have options, you don't want to do it at the big league level. Usually you'd like to do it at the AAA level. and otherwise just to gain some confidence. I think that is probably the biggest thing they would be trying to do here is send him to AAA, let him hopefully perform well for a couple weeks. And then, I mean, a lot of hitting is just having trust in what you're seeing and going out there and swinging confidently and believing in what you are doing at the plate. And I think with Joey, I talked about it last episode, or maybe it was 2 ago, but like he's had some bad luck on top of the bad performance. And I think sometimes that can make it even harder on you mentally, because you're just like, even when I do things correctly here, I'm still not getting anything out of it. Hopefully, again, some well-struck balls lately. Maybe he is turning things around a little bit before he even needs that reset, but it does feel like they're at least setting up the possibility of it. And it would not be shocking if they do go for it in another week or so, especially if things don't actually turn around here as he gets a couple better swings off. So, yeah, I would not have guessed that I would have been okay with this, like watching Monasterio in Nashville, but he's looked fine. He's looked competent. And I think that's enough to at least give him reason if they need to do it for Ortiz for the greater good, then they should feel good enough about it.
And obviously this wouldn't be a long-term solution. It would be much more of a patchwork. Can we send him down for 2 weeks and hopefully some things get straightened out? He comes back, everything's okay. Monasterio plays short for, no more than 20 days. I think that would, and I'm not even saying that's what's going to happen at this point, but it just seems to me like reading the signs that it really seems to me like they're exploring if this is something that they can do.
Yes.
If that's the route they need to take. So more time for him at shortstop lately. And we've talked about Monasterio before. Like I don't believe in the bat as far as hitting goes, but you at least know he's going to see some pitches. He can walk a decent amount. Like the quality of the plate appearances with how low the bar has gotten, unfortunately, he's even if he records an out, a lot of times it's going to be, he made the guy work for it at least a little bit. He saw some pitches, followed a couple off maybe, or drew the walk, whatever. So that's kind of what you're getting with Andre Monasterio.
Yes.
Let's move into some listener questions now. Start with Lucas, who asked us about Chad Patrick. The Brewers broadcast has been mentioning that Patrick is working on a slider. Personally, I feel like a softer sweeper in the low 80s would complement his repertoire more than a slider. What are your guys' thoughts on what would be the best way to tie together his repertoire? So I agree with you. I think so. Patrick so far is cutter. The cutter's basically 2 different pitches. He manipulates it. He's got the harder riding one that doesn't have as much, like little bit of late cut. But then he can also turn it into more of like a slidery type cutter if he's looking, for more of a chase. So he's got that. He's got the 4-seamer. He's got the 2-seamer. And then he's got a changeup as well that he sometimes throws. It's not great. And then the slider that he mixes in every once in a while. A sweeper absolutely plays better with that cutter than a standard slider does. But sometimes you need to be able to realize that pitch design it's not shopping. It's not like you're walking down a supermarket aisle and you can just pick out, oh, this pitch will complement my arsenal the best. Let's just throw this one, or let's just work on this one. You have to develop an arsenal not only around what you think makes everything play the best, but you have to develop it around what the pitcher can actually do, the way he can actually get the baseball to move. So I would not be shocked if the Brewers felt that a sweeper would be better for him too, but I don't think he can throw one. Kurt did a story about it in the Journal Sentinel, just about how he's got long fingers, including his pointer finger. And that gets in the way when he's trying to spin a breaking pitch. So that's why he's already struggling with the current slider. And if you're going to throw a sweeper, there are a couple ways you can do it, but the main one is usually you got to get efficient side spin on the baseball, and that's what's going to get it to sweep. Or sometimes you can do kind of like a modified 2-seam grip and get some seam shift and get it to go that way. That's how some other guys throw it. I think that's how Alexander throws his sweeper. It's a seam shifted one. But either way, like there's still side spin of some sort involved in that too. I think that with the way his hands are built, I think he just generally struggles to spin anything that isn't a cutter. So with that in mind, my guess is he just really can't throw that pitch, and I think that's why they just have him working on a shorter slider instead.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing to add there. It's definitely a case where it would make the most sense for him, but I forgot about the long fingers thing. He kind of talked about how that helps him manipulate the cutter a little bit, but yeah, he did talk about how it makes it more difficult for him to spin the breaking ball. So that,
because like with the cutter, he's like playing with pressure for a back spinner.
Right.
That's way different than playing with
yeah.
stuff trying to get side spin. It's not even close.
Yeah. So yeah, in an ideal world, I think absolutely you would like the sweeper. It's one of those things we talked about with Elvin Rodriguez back when we were talking about Elvin Rodriguez a lot. But the only reason we thought the cutter could even be part of the repertoire for him was that it would kind of help bridge the gap between the sweeper. So in the same sense, he's already got a good cutter on Patrick's end of things. He's got the good, solid four seam, and the sweeper would make a lot of sense. But yeah, if you can't throw it, then it doesn't really matter what the ideal pitch mix is. And he's struggling to even throw the slider. It could be a thing of, we've seen Freddie over the years be able to kind of change the sweeper shape, or change the slider shape. You never know if once he finds the slider, then he can start to tinker in the offseason or something and maybe find a way to make it bigger or make it more of a sweeper type of pitch. But I think you got to get almost that first movement down to some extent to even start thinking about that next one, because for a guy like Patrick, I should say, not for everybody, but for a guy like Patrick, you might have to almost make a small move first before you can start to change the shape in a bigger way. And I still would be kind of surprised if it could go further than the shorter slider.
If you want to make the case that they could go in a different direction, it's probably, and I'm not saying he can do this, but it's probably more like just try to throw a curveball from your slot and see if that works. Maybe they have tried it already, like not in front of pitch tracking in a game setting. Maybe he has tried it and it hasn't taken either. That wouldn't shock me. But I think if there's a way for him to get to bigger breaking glove side movement, like that's how he's a little more likely to get there. Just try to throw a curveball from that slot, because he's like a more of a 3/4, kind of trending into low 3/4 kind of slot. And if he tries to throw a curveball from there and he can actually spin it, it's going to move more like a slurve, basically.
Right.
So maybe he's capable of that. But again, I think just with the way his hand is, he can manipulate backspin to make the cutter do what he wants it to. But I think he just struggles with getting the breaking ball spin.
Yeah.
And that's one of those things where it's like you can't change the way guys are built physically. So you really can't do anything to get around that unless somebody invents or does more research on a new pitch where you can find a way to make it move that way within the constraints that he has. And maybe that happens somewhere down the line. I mean, kick changes are a thing now, and we found out a way to kick the axis on a ball for guys who normally can't pronate. So like maybe it's something that can happen down the line, but it's not there yet. So I think this is just kind of what he has to work with, and they have to find a way to make it happen. And I think they've just kind of landed on a normal slider, and probably for good reason.
Yeah.
This is a timely question because Christian Yelich homered twice in the Pirates game before Thomas asked this. But he said, is Yelich really healthy? If he was, you would think he'd be in the outfield instead of Jake Bauers. Let Bauers DH if you want his bat in the lineup, being short two outfielders. You would have thought that he would be playing some time in the outfield besides when Haas is catching. So because Contreras DH is when Haas is catching. So asking, if he's healthy, why aren't we seeing him in the field more? And honestly, I think it really just comes down to a lot of the time, like, number one, I think Bauers is not really too dissimilar from Yelich defensively at this point in at this point in Yelich's career. But number two, I wonder if it also comes down to you have the ability now to sub Collins into the game in left, and Yelich is still in the lineup as the DH late in the game.
Right. That's what I was going to go with. I think it's an easier way to keep Yelich's bat in the lineup. Now I know if you look at the stats, most people would probably say, well, that shouldn't be an important part of the equation. But I think just it's still too early in the season for me to say, like, at this point, you're still not wanting Christian Yelich up at the plate. And when you watch games, I think pitchers still have that, not fear, but like they don't want to see Yelich in the box either. I don't think we're at a point where pitchers are like, Christian Yelich steps in the box and they don't still have in the back of their head, like, okay, just last year, he was a very good hitter. And there's also further back an incredibly good hitter. I don't think we're at this point where just because he's at a bad start to the season, no doubt about it, that he isn't a threat in the box. And I do think there's still value in that every time he steps in there. So, and like Jack said, he did hit 2 homers today. Not to make a big deal or go too far into it, but it would have been tough for Yelich if that game would have gotten called with 2 outs in the 6th, because he would have lost his second homer on the books. And for a guy struggling like he is, that would have been, I'm sure he's a team guy. He would have been happy to take the win when they got it, but that would have been a tough way to lose a 2-homer game in the midst of a very rough stretch as he was having coming into this game. But I think the main thing is that you want to be able to put Collins in left, where that's your best defender out of the available players right now. And then you still have Yelich's bat in the lineup afterwards. And in some situations, you can also just move Bowers to first base when you do that, if you want that sort of defense at the end of a game too. So I think that might play a role as well, where Bowers doesn't have to come out of the game or drop the DH, which they wouldn't do. They would just leave reset first in that situation. But this does allow for the potential to have even better defense in left and first base by the end of the game. So that would be my guess.
Mason asks, long term, how do Jefferson, Cairo, and Contreras stay together on the roster, other than Cairo being just a backup catcher? Now, we've talked about this before. I think the Braves are kind of the model for that, with what they did a couple of years ago, where they had Sean Murphy and they still had Travis d'Arnaud, and those guys are both starting caliber catchers. They split the playing time between the two of them. Can use the DH to help with that. I think you can use it just to keep both guys fresh. So Cairo's been out a while. Spencer, I don't know if you've seen him since he's gotten back to playing.
No, he's still in the ACL right now. He's hit a couple homers,
but there's no like video.
There's no video of it. So he's been catching. He's also been DHing. It's been, when he catches, he's been coming out in like the 5th or 6th inning every time. So they're very much easing him into it. I think that kind of leads into, I'm sure this is where you're going with this, but like, I don't know how much overlap there's even going to be once Cairo comes up with how long Contreras is actually on the roster. So I think you probably get at least one season of that being a very real possibility, but that's going to be Cairo's rookie season. I don't think there's any problem with him being like a 60 start rookie. He gets some DH opportunity, like as a catcher. And then, I wouldn't be shocked if you saw William play some first base, especially like when you look ahead at the roster right now. There's a lot of lefty options for first base next year. So maybe in a game against a lefty starter, you put Contreras at first and Cairo behind the dish or something. Like, they'd be able to make it work along that Braves type of, the way the Braves did it a couple years ago. But I don't think it's going to be something they have to worry about for super long, because I don't think there's going to be a ton of overlap with their Brewers career. So I guess that says, if anyone ever wanted to ask about how likely we think a Contreras extension is, I think I just answered right there for me, at least. But I don't think it's going to be something they have to worry too much about, because I think by the time Cairo is truly ready to be like a full-time starter, I don't know that Contreras will be a Brewer at that point. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to kind of like what you said, the direction I was going to take it was, I mean, he's not up here till next year unless something catastrophic happens to Eric Haas and he's ready.
Yep.
Like, it seems very obvious that they are taking it slow with the return for him, and rightfully so, I think, because he's coming back from a the reason I was asking about the defense too is, like, I haven't seen him throw since he came off of this. It's his throwing shoulder.
That's what you're going to have to see. Yeah.
Like, and that was, good all around defensive catcher, but the arm was always the thing that got the most praise. So what does that even look like now? We don't know. like we spend all this time, we'll talk about Brandon Woodruff in a few minutes coming off a shoulder surgery as a pitcher, but like a catcher where throwing is a big part of his game.
Yeah.
That's kind of a big deal. And we, I asked you and you said there's no video yet, so we haven't seen it.
No.
We don't know what that looks like. So like I think there's also an element of even assuming that K-Row's going to be someone who catches a lot of innings for the Brewers down the line. I don't think that's a safe assumption right now either.
No.
So like those are the things you have to weigh too. But assuming it plays out the way that I think we're both thinking at this point, maybe they cut ties with Haas after this year. They think K-Row can kind of be that extended backup, and I think they find a way to make it work. And then maybe after next year, depending on what the plan is for William, then K-Row slides into a starting spot the following year. But and the other thing to think about too is so K-Row after this year will have burned two option years without ever playing in the big league. So they're going to see what they have in him next year.
Mm-hmm.
They are going to want him up here, and they are going to want him to get quite a bit of experience in some capacities. So, and I think kind of being, that backup or extended backup is the way to do it. And then you kind of see what you've got. That'll have been his last option year. Maybe he does spend that full year on the roster and he doesn't burn it, but like I think it's going to work out that way with the timeline, with decisions they have to make, directions the position's going, all that kind of stuff. And again, you don't know what you're going to get out of him. Like he was ascending really quickly, but that got interrupted pretty severely by that injury.
Yeah. I think the one thing that he can fall back on is even if the arm doesn't get back to totally where it was, which was, it was a plus arm. Some people put almost an 80 on the scouting scale for it. If it falls to like a 60, I think he's still going to be a solid catcher. If it's completely fallen off the map and he can't throw, or it's, now he's Stephen Vogt back there, like now we're getting into a danger area. So yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how it actually looks when he starts catching games in Nashville and just seeing how, as hard as it is to get pop times on AAA or on minor league games, because you never know when the camera actually flipped or if it's synced up or anything. I'm definitely going to be trying to see where he's at and see what it looks like. And yeah, that's going to be the main thing to watch for sure.
Kevin asks about Caleb Durbin, and this ties into something I wrote about Caleb Durbin this week. What are the odds that the Brewers eventually get fed up with Caleb Durbin and his HLP hitting coach, make him ditch him? So let's, in case people aren't familiar, let's provide a little bit of context for this. So Caleb Durbin, his issue right now is that he does not hit the ball hard, which we knew. You can go back to like the podcast where we reacted to the Devin Williams return. And what we talked about with Caleb Durbin was right away the immediate red flag is he doesn't hit the ball hard. He had one of the lowest hard hit rates in all of AAA. The way that he worked around that was he was really, really good. Like a skill that he could repeat in AAA was pulling all of his line drives or a bunch of his line drives, tucking them down the left field line. So if you look at his spray chart, he's got a bunch of, in AAA last year, a bunch of like 88 mile per hour doubles that he tucked right down the line. And because of the speed too, he was able to get a double out of it as well. Or he's got like 97 mile an hour fly balls that he roped around the foul pole in left field where the fence gets shorter. Like he could cheat to power, so to speak, or like manufacture power from not hitting the ball super hard because he could pull it really well. Isaac Paredes kind of does a similar deal at the big league level as well. But that was our question about Caleb Durbin was, can he actually, when he gets up to the big leagues, can he repeat this? Is it going to work at this level against this kind of pitching? And so far it has not whatsoever. What's happening is he's basically he's hitting a bunch of like 87 mile an hour flyouts. And if you hit a ball in the air at 87 miles an hour, that's an automatic out, which is why the batting average is so low. That's why the BABIP is like under 200. And usually when we talk about a BABIP being over 100 points below the league average, it's because you're getting unlucky. In his case, because he's just hitting a bunch of 87 mile an hour fly balls, he's actually not getting that unlucky. His expected weighted on base average on contact is the lowest in baseball among hitters with at least 80 batted balls, and it's the lowest by over 20 points. So basically that means that with the velocity and the launch angle he's hitting the baseball at, historically, those are balls that just do not turn into hits, because that's what expected StatCast stuff is based. It's based on the results that those kinds of batted balls have historically produced since 2015. So he basically he's making a ton of contact, but it's all contact that is almost always an automatic out. So I asked Pat Murphy about it for when I wanted to write about this, and basically he said what's going on with Durbin's swing right now is, Murphy didn't say the HLP thing, but if you look, like, it's the HLP thing, because he said it's like the Aaron Judge thing. So the hitting coach in question that Kevin's talking about is Aaron Judge's personal hitting coach. And he has Aaron Judge do what he calls a high-level pattern swing. And the way that this swing works is basically what you do is, like, you've got your leg kick, and then the way that he tries to get this to work is your power comes from as you move forward. Instead of thinking like with your arms, like swinging the bat and like lower half, like follows, like lower half gets down, pulls through, the arms doing all this stuff just coming together. He likes to have the hitter think about it as I'm coming forward, I'm snapping my hands. So I'm using my hands to snap the barrel to the ball. And he says that if you time that up with your forward move as your lower body's going forward, that your barrel's just going to run into the ball. It's going to be like super explosive, and you're going to hit for more power that way. That Caleb Durbin, if you look at like this guy's social media page, Caleb Durbin works with this guy. It's the same hitting coach that Aaron Judge uses. It works for Aaron Judge, but Aaron Judge is 6'7" and 280 pounds. Caleb Durbin has the exact opposite build of Aaron Judge. I can see why he would try it, though, because my guess is that's probably how he got to a lot of the pull side power in the minor leagues, like how he got really good at just pulling these line drives. The problem that Murphy said is going on right now, and again, Murphy didn't mention this hitting coach or anything, but Murphy said it's like it's a version of the Judge move. So, lines up with what you see. Durbin has worked with this guy. But what Murphy said, and I have it in the story too, if you want to read the full thing at Brewer Fanatic, where I explain it a little bit more. But what Murphy said is basically what's happening is his hands are coming down, like he's snapping and then moving forward. And because he's snapping early, everything comes down. And then when he comes through, as he starts moving forward, he's underneath the ball every single time. And that's why he's hitting all of these flyouts instead of, like these line drives that he would pull down the line. And then, line drives that he's pulling down the line. And then when he does get into a fly ball, it's a pulled fly ball that he can tuck over the fence. What's also happening, Murphy said, is like the stuff is just getting on him quicker too. So a lot of these balls that he would normally pull, because it's getting on him quicker and he's a little bit later. Think about it. If you're trying to pull a ball, you got to meet it out in front a little bit to pull it. If he's a little bit late now, all of a sudden those pitches are going like fly balls to center or fly balls to left center. And if you look at his spray chart, that's pretty much exactly what's happening. So that brings us to Kevin's question. When did they get fed up with this guy? And like, yeah, if to me, like as soon as I started hearing all this stuff, like immediate red flags are going off for me, because yes, this hitting coach in question can point to his success with Aaron Judge and I mean, like there's no better success story that you can find than Aaron Judge, the best hitter in baseball. The problem is Aaron Judge is a freak, like physically a freak. There is only one, like there are very few guys in baseball who are built like Aaron Judge and can do what Aaron Judge does. So if Caleb Durbin is trying to do what Aaron Judge does, or some version of it, is that really going to work? And right now it's not working. So like you look at where it's at right now, and I hate to say it so quickly, but based on and I've heard some things about, I'm not like, I can't go into too much detail, but I've heard some things about this hitting coach as well. Just, with the kind of people I get to talk to. when it doesn't work for guys, it works for Judge, but for guys it does not work for, the perception is it tends to screw you up pretty badly, just this high level pattern stuff. And I think that's what's going on with Caleb Durbin. So usually I don't like to say stuff about like this about a guy like, 100 some plate appearances into his big league career, but based on, some of like what you see about this stuff, what Murphy said about like just where Durbin's swing is right now, the like trying to hit like Judge, and then just some background stuff I get from people. Like I think he needs a swing overhaul, I think, to hit in the big leagues.
Yeah.
And if he does not do it, he is a 4A hitter. Like a guy who's going to be able to hit minor league pitching but cannot hit big league pitching. So if I'm the Brewers, I'm making him ditch this very soon. The problem is it's hard to do that in season.
Right.
You're this far in now. Like it's a very tall task to ask a guy to significantly rewire his swing in season. That's almost always an off-season project. So I don't know how much they can do on that front right now. But yes, I think right now he is using a move that is never going to work for him, especially against big league pitching. And if he's going to hit, it's got to go away, because he's got to figure out a move that allows him to hit line drives, preferably still to the pull side, but just hit line drives against big league pitching. Because if you can't hit the ball hard, you got to hit a bunch of line drives. That's just that's how it's worked for Luis Arraez. Doesn't hit the ball hard, but he hits a ton of line drives, can guide ground balls through holes. And I'm not saying Durbin's got to be Arraez. I think what Arraez does to an extent only works for him too, because nobody's got bat control like that.
Yeah.
Like he can actually steer the ball exactly where he wants it to go. That's not something that a lot of people have. But just generally, if you do not hit the ball hard, you got to hit it on a line, because that's the only way you're going to get it through. That's the only way, you're going to avoid soft ground outs and flyouts. Hitting the ball in the air is one of the best things you can do if you hit it hard. It's one of the worst things you can do if you don't hit it hard.
Yes.
Because a fly ball that is not hard to hit, that is almost an automatic out, unless you're hitting like a 70-mile-an-hour bloop single that falls in every time. But that's not really that's not a skill either. So yeah, I mean, he's got to ditch this. I don't think it's going to work for him.
Yeah, I agree. This is the guy he's working with. Like, he has Kerry Carpenter's another success story for him. That guy really turned his career around working with Teacher Man is what he goes by on all the social media accounts, I believe. But it just doesn't even make sense when you think about it with Durbin. I guess to an extent it does, because it obviously worked for him in the minors and it got him to this point. But like you said, it would have been really hard to believe that this would ever carry over into a big league hitting approach. And yeah, I mean, I think the only way you can do it in season is by sending him back to Nashville and maybe even putting him on what they have down there is the development list, and having him take like a few weeks away from true games and just trying to rebuild it in that time. And it takes reps to rebuild a swing. Like, you're going to have some growing pains through all of this anyway. So you'd want that to happen in the minors. But yeah, I think we are kind of at that point where it's just very hard to believe that this would work for him at the big league level. And that means you have to change something if you're ever going to make it work. So yeah, I don't know. I'm curious how teams handle the type of like personal hitting coach. I think at one point it was even rumored that the Yankees weren't like big fans of Judge going to this dude. And then Judge is now hitting 400 and just absolutely crushing the ball at all times. So like, I'm sure they got over it, but I wonder how they handle that. If they tell him like, hey, we need you to work with our guys and we're going to retool this. I'm sure they have to at some point if they're going to go that route, but it'd just be interesting to hear how that actually happens. But yeah, I think they have to. I think they have to go that direction, and it doesn't seem like it's going to work out. And the thing we talked about when Durbin was being called up was that I thought at least that he would at least outperform like the Capras and the Duns of the world offensively. And I guess technically he has, because that wasn't much to live up to but that the defense was always going to be a concern and iffy, and that has very much held true. While the bat has not been very good at this point, he's just kind of in that same category with those others two for me, where he's not a big leaguer right now. So I guess that could lead into the other question that Kevin asked us about Durbin. If he's not able to figure it out, what are the chances they attempt to let Collins try third base so Bowers can play every day? I've seen Collins play third base in the minors before. I don't know that that's something I would super enjoy watching.
He's an outfielder. He's more of an outfielder than
he's
an
more of an outfielder than an infielder.
Like there's you've watched him, but there's also a reason why the Brewers are handling him the way they are. Like it's almost exclusively outfield, and I think he looks pretty good out there too in left.
He's done well in left, yeah. If he were to play infield, second base is the only spot I would feel at all comfortable with him playing. And again, with no Terang being able to move to short because of the arm issue, then there's really no way to make that work where you're still getting Bowers in there every day. And I don't think they need to. Again, Bowers has been very good, but I think we both agree that it's pretty unlikely to continue for the longer term. So I think the way they're handling Bowers' playing time is fine right now. I don't think they need to force him into the lineup. I think you could make the argument right now that maybe if you're going to have a lefty DH against a lefty starter, maybe you go with him instead of Yelich, just because Yelich has been that bad. I think that's maybe the only way I would open up a little bit more playing time with Bowers, but I don't think you need to force him into the lineup. I think it reminds me, not to the same level, but like of the Keston Hiura needs to play every day thing. The more he plays, I think the more you're going to see some of the struggles start to compound for a guy like Bowers. And I think it's more of like you can set him up for success by playing him in the right matchups against the right pitchers, and he can take advantage of that. And that might be how you get the best out of him. It might not look as good if you're playing him regularly. So I guess that's how I would answer that portion of the question. But yeah, I don't think Durbin's going to work out right now unless there's some major changes.
Let's move on to some roster and injury updates, and then we can get into your minor league sandbox. So Rob Z is back, like we talked about earlier. The Brewers acquired him from the Yankees in exchange for cash. Basically, it was never confirmed which one what kind of clause specifically, because there's a difference between like an opt-out and an upward mobility. But basically, he had something where I would guess probably upward mobility based on the way it sounds, but it was never said in certain terms. But he had something in his minor league contract with the Yankees. There was some kind of thing coming up where he had a way to get out of it. So the Brewers had interest. They traded for him. But it's a good thing for them that he's back. Like, this is a guy who, since the Brewers signed him to a minor league deal the first time 2 off seasons ago, I have believed that the stuff is MLB reliever, like MLB caliber reliever, because he's revamped a lot of things. I wrote about the whole thing. I talked to him last year when he got called up for the first time by the Brewers last year. So that I just reposted that story on Twitter too, if people want to go through my feed and find it again in case they missed it. Like, a lot of good stuff from him about kind of like what we talked about in response to Lucas's question, like how pitch design really works. Like, you have to you're working within what, based on the way my body moves, what can I do? So based on that, he got all the data, found out that, he can throw a sweeper, but not a curveball. So he switched to that, developed his cutter more. And then when he was in free agency, he and the Brewers like really linked up on what they thought the next steps were for his arsenal. Again, all those details are in the story. So good fit for him. When he came up, pitched really well. Unfortunately, an elbow injury sidelined him for what ended up being the rest of the year. He went on a rehab assignment late in the year, was healthy enough to pitch by the playoffs, but didn't make the roster. But he was in the mix for it. But now he's back, and Rob Z is out of options. So he's going to be around. Like, this is not just a temporary addition while the bullpen rests up a little more. They think that he's going to be a guy who can get a lot of outs for them, and I would agree. The other interesting part of this move as well is Pat Murphy said that it was partially in response to Brian Hudson looking the way that he's looked. Just the velo and the command, like nothing has been consistent. And it sounds like the Brewers just feel like they need more consistency out of that spot from a lefty. Murphy said they had a need for better left-handed relievers behind Jared Koenig. So that's the role that Rob Z is going to fill. It's unfortunate for Hudson, though, because this knocks him down further on the depth chart, and it's getting harder to see how he's going to be able to make an impact for the big league team. It's an unfortunate development from where he was a year ago, but I think it seems like the Brewers are kind of coming to terms with the fact that it's just so all over the place right now that they can't rely on him for a whole lot, and now they're taking some steps to make sure that they don't have to rely on him for a whole lot.
Yeah, absolutely. It is funny that he touched 94.5 in his AAA appearance tonight, and the average velo was up a decent amount. So
it's like 93.
Yeah,
he averaged 93.
Right. So what I should say on that note, just to tie it all together, I guess he had not pitched since that Cleveland game that he pitched for the Brewers. So it'd been about 10 days. My guess is he pitched, I think he threw 50 pitches in that game. They kind of let him hang out. So there was always going to be an extended rest after that. But I'm guessing, and I think he had mentioned this, that they had to figure out some mechanical stuff. And I'm sure he went down there and did some work on mechanical things. And perhaps we saw not only the rest, but also some improvement in that regard. And maybe that will help him regain some of the velo, but also just the sweeper, I believe, averaged 82 today. I think he only threw 2 or 3 of them, so it wasn't a big sample, but that was up a little bit too. So good to see on that front. We'll see where it goes, but I think absolutely having Zastryzny here takes some of the pressure off of him and also makes it just, there's more options for the Brewers here. And this is a guy who, since he's been in the Brewers system, he performed in AAA. And like you said, when he got his chance last year, he performed really well. And you can see it there. There haven't been, it's a small sample this year too, but you can tell hitters just can't really square him up. They don't really feel super comfortable against him, and he gives them a different look. And I think he, like your article talked about, and like he talked about with you, like, I think he's very comfortable in his own skin as a pitcher now. He's very comfortable with what he's doing. And I talked about it with hitting earlier. Confidence in what you're throwing and conviction in your pitches goes a really long way. And I think he's at a point in his career where he truly believes in every pitch he's throwing. And that goes a long way too. And my guess would be that Hudson's not really at that point right now, where he's probably questioning things as he's pitching a lot. And I don't think that's the case with Zastryzny. So I think you've got a guy here that you can rely on. And as long as he can stay healthy, I think he's going to help the Brewers for probably the rest of the season if he stays healthy.
And this might be, I think this is honestly the first step in what's going to end up being kind of a left-handed makeover in that bullpen, because you've got Aaron Ashby and DL Hall are on the way back.
Yep.
We don't really have time to go into what DL Hall's working on, but he's working on some stuff too that could be interesting to watch when he gets back. But those are two lefties who it sounds like they are intent on having help in the big leagues. Like we'll get to, Yoel Payamps is DFA'd, so that now opens up another optionable spot in that bullpen, which makes it easier to kind of navigate those two guys coming back. But I mean, when those guys are ready, now all of a sudden you're pretty deep in lefty swing type arms. We've talked about it before. Tyler Alexander could be the next man on the chopping block because he's not owed a lot of money. It's been kind of up and down for him. And again, like I said, I don't blame that last outing on him. I think that was a tough spot where he just probably was not going to pitch like himself. So I think you have to consider that. But, if they feel good about what Hall and Ashby can contribute, Alexander doesn't have options. They can't send him down. So maybe he's a guy who loses his spot too moving forward. But that left-handed half of that Brewers bullpen outside of Jared Koenig, I think it's going to look, it's already a little different now that Rob Z is here and then Hudson is further down the depth chart, but I think it's going to look even different in a couple weeks here once you start getting I think Hall is the one who looks close now. Ashby, I don't think really looks all that close from what the reports have been in AAA, but I mean, Hall looked pretty good in his last rehab outing. I think he's the one who, like, pretty darn close to being able to make an impact now.
Yeah, 100% agree. Yeah, Koenig's the only lefty who, from the original group, that I think we will probably see on the roster by like mid-June. I think that'll be a pretty overhauled part of the pen for sure.
So like I said, Yoel Payamps was DFA'd. That was part of like a whole, let's just go through the whole set of moves right now. So Piamps was DFA'd. Easton McGee optioned after only getting 1 inning out of him after he was called up specifically for length in the bullpen. But those 2 guys shipped out. Savali activated prematurely from his rehab assignment because of the bullpen situation, and then Carlos Rodriguez called up as well. So Rodriguez was originally reportedly scheduled to start that game, and they had to shift some things around and basically add another length guy who wasn't originally supposed to be there because the pen was in shambles. But as part of those moves, Piamps lost his roster spot. I mean, I do believe that if Murphy had not run the bullpen into the ground, they could have had a little more time to keep working at getting him right. I do think in a way he is it's not a huge casualty because we'll talk about this in response to a question we got. Not a huge casualty, but a casualty nonetheless. I think that the fact that, Murphy was so aggressive with the bullpen and contributed to it being in the state that it's in right now, one of the side effects of that was you couldn't wait out Piamps any longer. He had to go. But Indy 75 asked us this week, and this is before they made the move that he asked this question, but it's still applicable here. Am I the crazy person because I think Piamps should still be on the roster even after giving up a run in a game they should have punted anyways? So talking about that last game against Baltimore. No, I don't think you're crazy because, I mean, again, the stuff did not get any worse for him, and I think that's why the Brewers kept riding with him for as long as they did. And I never got a chance to ask somebody about this, and maybe I still will on the next homestand, but you could tell they were working on stuff. The last 10 innings or so where he actually threw the ball okay, I don't know if you picked up on it too, Spencer. He was a lot less crossfire. He was way more direct in how he was striding to the plate. And this is what I wanted to ask someone about because Murphy had just said generally they were working on some stuff behind the scenes with him. And you could tell the delivery was quite a bit different than it used to be. But yeah, I mean, I think they were sticking with him because there was I don't think there was any great explanation that was telling you he can't get it back because the stuff didn't get any worse. I understand why the Brewers kept him as long as they did. And again, in a normal scenario, if the bullpen was in decent shape, I would have also been okay with keeping him a little bit longer to see if he could figure it out. I would have given him, depending on how things went, at least a couple more weeks. Unless he had another blow up before then, obviously, but kind of if he stayed where he was, where it was mostly okay, and then a couple outings here and there where he'd give up 1 run, which is where he had been at since his last blow up, I would have given him a little more time. But at the end of the day, they were now in a bullpen crunch. And the other thing you got to think about here is okay, so you're giving him more time, but what's the upside?
Yeah.
And even if he fully got back to form, the upside still isn't that great because he was going to get non-tendered this year. He's a 1-inning reliever. At the end of the day, you're putting in so much time where even if it works out, there's not actually that much upside to it in the grand scheme of things. So I think at this point, that's really where the argument for cutting him is. It's just, even if it works, if you had hung out longer and it works, you're still not getting that. It's a 1-inning reliever who is best cast as a middle relief guy and can pitch some high leverage. There is value to that, but it's also fairly replaceable compared to a lot of other positions. And I think that's really what it comes down to. So, if the bullpen was in better shape for the reasons we talked about, I would have been okay with, you ride it out for a little bit longer, but the bullpen's not in good shape. They needed fresh guys, and Piamps made sense as the casualty. It's the reality of the situation. So that's the way they played it.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, we've had our Piamps discussions over the last 2 years, and you were absolutely proven correct last year. And I think this year it was even trending that way again, but I think it just ended up being the time where there wasn't room. And like you said, you needed a fresh arm, multiple fresh arms. And in the end, none of the optionable guys were guys who should be going down. And he was kind of the clear-cut favorite for the non-optionable guys. If you had to make space, he was the obvious choice, I think, for now. So when Hall and Ashby return, like you said, I think then you have another choice on the table with Alexander. But for now, I think it was a pretty easy choice just because of the situation. I think if they could have held, or if they would have had more space for pitchers right now, I think they would have absolutely tried to continue working on it, working on what they were working on him with, but they don't have time. So they had to make this move.
A couple of injury updates for some Brewers starting pitchers real quick. Jose Quintana, he's continued to throw, never really stopped since that shoulder impingement diagnosis. He got a second opinion. Second opinion, for once, actually said that it's not any worse than what the initial opinion said. So it's a good thing for Quintana and the Brewers. He's feeling pretty good at this point, but sounds like he's probably going to need a rehab start before he can come back, which would push him back a little bit. So probably not looking at that Red Sox series when he would be eligible to come off the IL, probably a turn after that before he's able to come back. Brandon Woodruff began a new rehab assignment last night, starting with the Nashville Sounds. If you remember, the final rehab start he made, the velo went even further down. He was averaging 90 on his four-seamer and sinker. They pulled him. Word came out that he was dealing with a right ankle injury, so that's his push-off foot, and that can absolutely impact your velocity.
Mm-hmm.
They had him sit for about the 7 to 10 days and then back on a rehab assignment. Pitched in Nashville last night, and the results look fine. But I mean, the stuff is still, like, the velo's not where it needs to be still. Yeah. I think he went from 90.3 in that last rehab to 91 as the average, still dipping down into the upper 80s a couple times. Like, that's just, we've had plenty of discussions about this. If we were pleasantly surprised and proven wrong when he was sitting 92, and we talked about, like, that 92, if the shapes were where they always had been, 92 shapes are normal. Added a couple new pitches in the sweeper and the cutter, like, he can get outs with that. If the velo's down to 90,
yeah,
now you're back in territory where, like, he's going to have to, if he comes back throwing 90, then he's going to have to completely reinvent the way he pitches. But then there's the other can of worms. If this is actually where it's going to settle, then he needs even more rehab starts, because now he's got to figure out, like, okay, now I got to throw more junk instead of going right at guys with the fastball. Like, it's just, he's not ready right now. So he's going to make it. Todd Rosiak said today he's already tabbed for at least another rehab start. And I would imagine they're going to use the full clock again on this one.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another 30 days. And, now we're kind of back to where we were. Well, we talked about originally, and I don't think we ever officially changed the prediction. We said we were feeling a lot better. I don't know that we ever officially changed the prediction, but like we had said, like 100 innings with a league average ERA.
Yeah.
I think when we saw the stuff tick up, we maybe changed it to we stayed on 100 innings, but maybe we said like more like a 100 innings with a 3.7 ERA instead of like 100 innings with a just over 4 ERA or a low 4s ERA. Like, that might have been what we changed it to. But I mean, now if he's getting if he goes for the 30 days again, now 100 innings is looking optimistic. It's looking like even we were overly optimistic for saying 100 innings is like the realistic best case scenario, because now I don't know that he's even going to hit that.
Yeah. I mean, everything you said is correct. I don't think the current version of what we've seen these last two rehab starts can pitch in the big leagues to much success. I mean, he could come up and do it. And I think there's probably going to be an element of, especially that first start, I'll be curious to see, like, when he does make it back, where the velo is that first start, and then where it settles after that. I have a feeling he'll be a bit up the first time he's out there compared to where he ends up settling. So we'll have to see how that all plays out. But it does make me wonder, like, where I think the ankle tendonitis is absolutely happening. I'm curious as to why they went so quickly. They basically just had him miss, like, a couple extra days of rest, because they had to sit him for 7 days, I believe, with the restart of the clock here. But, like, it seems like they probably could have given a little bit more time if they they must have felt comfortable, I guess, with the ankle and having him go back out there. But clearly something still seems a little off with him. Maybe the next start will look better. But yeah, the current version, not a major league caliber, like solid major league caliber pitcher. And we'll have to see where it goes. I mean, if in 2 rehab starts he looks great and they feel comfortable, maybe it's at that point that they do this. But I feel bad for him, obviously, because I think he was feeling like he was very, very close. And now it feels like probably the first setback he's had in a while. And I always just think back to his debut. And if people remember, like he got hurt in the Cardinals bullpen warming up for his major league debut and had to wait like an extra month and a half even to make his debut at that time. So I guess at least to that extent, he has a little experience with some disappointment when you're on the edge of making your debut, or in this case, your big time, long awaited return. But yeah, I'm sure that's been a tough thing for him to handle. And otherwise, I mean, I agree with everything you said. I think even our 100 innings is probably unlikely to happen at this point, because if you think about it, he's probably like a 5-inning guy for the most part, and that's 20 starts. That's going to be pretty hard to reach that level at this point, that many games, that many starts. So
yeah, I mean, 20 starts of 5 innings, that puts you at like exactly 100.
Right. Yeah, I can do the math. Thank you. But
just double checking.
that was why I said it. But no,
just confirming for the audience too.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think that's where we're kind of looking right now. I think we're probably looking more at like, if we get 80 solid innings out of him, that would be a pretty good season for him now. So that's all right. Again, it's always been the case that whatever you get from him, you will take. And especially if it's solid performance, it doesn't need to be some insane return where you get an all-star version of Woodruff again. He can help the team. And if that's what you get, that's what you get. So I think that's what we're looking at even more now.
Yeah, and I think right from the start, we both felt 80 innings would still be good. Like we had said, 100 was like the if there's a realistic best case scenario, like the best case scenario that could happen.
Yeah,
like 100 innings is kind of what we had penciled for that one. So I think now like it hasn't quite changed yet, but we're getting very close to the like really good best case success story being 100 innings. It still could be, but we're very close to that changing. And now I think now like the 80 or something, 70, 80 is looking even more likely.
Yeah.
But we'll see kind of what the next steps look like on the rehab. This is why we talked about it though. Like you gotta be willing to temper your expectations, expect that things aren't always going to go great. And, if the ankle really if it's a new thing that nobody foresaw popping up, that obviously complicates it too. That's an obstacle that maybe you weren't expecting beyond just the ups and downs of a shoulder rehab, but we'll see what the next steps look like for him. I know your minor league sandbox is also starting with an injury update. So talk to us about what's going on with Anthony Siegler, a guy who I think some people have now been clamoring to see in the big leagues pretty soon.
Yes, I am some people in this scenario. He finally got his I've been asking on here, I've been tweeting about it. I wanted Siegler to get a chance at third base because I think, again, we talked about third base and all the issues that are currently there at the big league level, and Siegler has shown the ability to handle second base really well. He's a catcher as well, and that to me points to a guy who should have the arm to handle third base and the athleticism and everything else. And he gets his first start at third base, and what do you know, but 3 innings in, he has a hustle double, dives into second base. He stands up with a big fist pump. He was all pumped up about the hustle double, and then he looked at his hand and realized that his pinky was hanging off to the side basically, and he'd really messed up his pinky. So to the shock of myself and some other people, he was actually back in the lineup today as a DH. He went 1 for 2 with 2 walks, so looked to be fine at the plate. Still, I'm guessing this is going to make it more difficult for him to play the field at the moment. If you think about it, swinging a bat, the pinky is kind of something that you don't need at all. But obviously, when you're squeezing a glove or squeezing the ball in your hand, the pinky is going to be a little bit more involved. So for now, my guess is he'll mostly be DHing. But it is nice to see that he's already back on the field playing. And I really think that if he shows like 4 or 5 good games of being able to handle third base, I think you will see him at the big league level at that point, because everything else he does, I've talked about it a lot, but switch hitter, it's not big power, but he's got a good approach. He hits the ball on a line a lot. He can hit the ball out. Even there's a little bit more juice there than like a Durbin has. I think it's not quite that level of, I'd say more in like the free lick territory of power, which is still not much, but I think he's more likely to tap into some at the big league level than a guy like Durbin. But he does a lot of really good things on the field, and again has all that flexibility, including catcher, which actually, just to circle it back in, like that could make Eric Haas a little bit easier to potentially pinch hit in a game if it came up in the right spot, because you feel comfortable knowing there's a third guy who can actually catch. So it could give the Brewers some more flexibility if he works out. So good to see him back in the lineup. We'll see if he plays third base and how it goes, but I think if it goes well, we will see him in the big leagues sooner rather than later. Another injury update, Tyler Black. He is in the ACL on a rehab assignment through 5 games coming into tonight. Not sure if he played tonight or not, but he was hitting 357, 500 on base, 643 slug. He had 2 doubles and a triple. He had played 2 games at first base and 2 games in left field. So that's interesting and noteworthy. I think outfield has always been where I think he would be best fit. And clearly they're going to start giving him more opportunities out there. So he also DH'd in that other game, but in the field, 2 in left, 2 at first. Staying in the ACL, non-injury, Handle Fry Encarnacion. One of the guys I kind of tweeted about before the season as somebody to watch who wasn't really as big of a name to know. He had a grand slam this week. He had 2 doubles, a 1333 OPS for the season. He's batting .310 with a 408 on base, 595 slug for a 1003 OPS. He had 2 homers and 6 doubles. He did add a homer to that tally tonight. So his OPS went up a little bit more. Everything except the average went up today because he did go 1 for 4, but he also drew a walk. Either way, 3 homers now, showing power. He's got it's a big hack. It's almost, there's some like Ernesto Martinez Jr. to the swing. So it's full body. There's a lot behind it, but I'm a fan. I think he has a good idea of how to hit the ball in the air for power. He's had exit velos up near 110 already. He's not 18 yet. He's 17 until I think June 10th or so. He's an interesting name. Another guy from last year's international class to keep an eye on. And speaking of, I've got one more here. Frederi Montero did not perform super well in the DSL, but got pushed to the ACL still this year, which always noteworthy when somebody does that, because it means the organization is pretty high on him, despite not really showing a ton at the DSL level. So far this year, he is batting .459 with a 545 on base and a 595 slug. It's a 211 WRC plus. He has an absolutely ridiculous 43.8% line drive rate. It's only like 12 games in, but still 5 doubles. His walk rate is 13.6%. His strikeout rate is 11.4%. The exit velos, from what I've heard, and I talked to one person who's seen them, and then I've seen some other people write them up a little bit. Exit velos aren't crazy good, but for someone who hasn't hit a professional homer yet, they're actually not bad. He's just got a very heavy line drive and ground ball approach. If he can get the ball in the air a little bit more, I think you will start to see some power. He's 6'2" and 188 pounds. So there's a build there that could get into some power. I think he's a good athlete at that size. He can handle third base well, from what I've heard. A name that not many people knew about, including, I knew who he was. I'd heard of him, but I was not expecting this type of output. And he's another one that has to be on your radar from last year's international class. Yet again, a 2023 international signing here, Luis Pena, or 2024, I should say. He had a 2-homer week. He also hit a ball 113 miles per hour for a single. His 90th percentile exit velocity is up over 7 miles per hour from last year. The only bad news here, he did end the week on the IL. He had a collision at first base and ended up with a concussion. Hopefully a short-term thing. It sounds like it took a little bit for the symptoms to set in, because he actually got scratched from the next game. He was in the lineup until the last minute, and then they put him on the IL. So Hopefully nothing too major there, but a little bit of a scare for sure. And the main thing is with his play, I mean, in all reality, he's actually having like the Jackson Churio type of breakout in low A. Mate just had it at the DSL level, but Pena's kind of having it at the low A level, hitting the ball way harder than he did the year before. That's what Churio did. Starting to get into some homer power, but also a lot of doubles and triples. That's what Churio did. And Pena has almost 20 more steals than Churio did at this point. So there's a lot to like here. Sticking with a low A guy at the time, at the start of the week, Marco Dingus did get promoted to high A. He had a sac fly in his first game, and then he hit a 111-mile-per-hour homer in his second game. He also backpicked a runner at first, and then he did that again tonight, showing off the arm. Fangraphs gave him a 70 arm. I would probably put like a 60 on it, but it is a very good arm. And he's such a good athlete back there. The more I see him, the more I think he's going to stick as a catcher, and that will give him a lot of value moving forward because the bat is legit. Moving to the pitcher side of things, another 2024 draft pick here, starting in the complex league, Jaden Dubinevich. He went 5 innings. He gave up 3 hits, 2 walks, struck out 7, and allowed 1 earned run in his start against the Royals in the complex league. And the nice part about this start is that the Royals had StatCast data going on for that game. So the Brewers have had 2 games in the complex league with StatCast data this year, which is the first time I can remember that ever being the case. And it's nice for these young pitchers for me to be able to kind of see what they have. And nothing stands out as like plus for Dubinevich right now. He's 6'3", he's 160 pounds. So his extension is about 6.7 feet, which is above average. So that's kind of the main thing he has going for him at the moment. His 4-seam, negative 4.4 degree vertical approach angle, and it averaged about 93 miles per hour in this start. So 19-year-old all season, good extension, pretty decent velo in that 93 range. He was sitting more like 88, 89 in high school. So now he's sitting around 93. He also, the fact he's gone 4 2/3 or longer in all 3 of his starts this season. So that's also pretty noteworthy, I think, for a guy who's coming out of high school. And normally complex league pitchers don't go that deep into games right off the bat. So they clearly like him as a starter. The walk numbers have been a little high, but the strikeouts are in a good spot, and you can see some interesting stuff. So just to run through it quick, he throws a 4-seam and a 2-seam. He throws a slider and a curveball, although I think that might be pitch tagging a little interesting on their part. I think it's sliders. I think he's throwing all sliders. Although there is a couple mile per hour difference in the velo. So maybe it's just a pitch that he needs to separate a little bit better in the movement. And then he throws a changeup that I actually think is probably his best secondary right now. It seemed a little inconsistent in this start, but at its best, it was getting around 0 induced vertical break and up to 19 inches of horizontal break, which is that's a really good pitch. He takes about 7 to 8 miles per hour off of the fastball on it. So that might be the most interesting pitch at the moment, but a lot to work with here. Very raw stuff from a very projectable body. So that'll be one I'll be watching. Speaking of projectable bodies, although this one's a lot older than Dubinevich, Jaron DeBerry, one of my favorite picks from last year's draft, just as in terms of value and in terms of fit with the organization. He was promoted to high A along with Dingus. He has not pitched there yet, but I did want to call that out because I'm a big DeBerry guy. He's done extremely well in his 3 appearances in low A, so they're pushing him to high A right away. Another guy who's moved to high A, Tanner Gillis. He was an undrafted free agent out of Northern Kentucky last year. In his first start in high A, he went 6 innings, 3 hits, 2 walks, 3 strikeouts, 1 earned run. Not great on the line overall in terms of, 2 walks to 3 strikeouts. Not super great, but he did get a ton of ground balls. On the season, he's thrown 33 in the third innings. He has a 1.35 ERA, a 2.7 FIP, 31 strikeouts, 10 walks, and a ground ball rate of around 53%. So he's a guy whose main fastball, unsurprisingly, is a sinker, gets a lot of grounders with that. I think his best off-speed pitch is his changeup. He does not use it much right now. I think he should use it more. But he is a cutter and a 4-seam guy, so he throws all 3 fastballs. And then he does throw a slider as well, which is not bad. He's old. He's 24. He was in college for, I believe, 6 seasons because he started at a low-level school and worked his way up to D1, but kind of a late bloomer. He's up to 96, sits 91 to 94, and the command is decent. I mean, it's not great, but he's in and around the zone pretty regularly. So an interesting arm to watch, another undrafted guy that at least is worthy of being on the radar. Melvin Hernandez, I talked about him before. He's no longer the youngest player at low A for pitchers. He is the second youngest. Somebody got promoted from the complex league for a different team, but still the second youngest player in the league. 7 inning complete game this week. He gave up 6 hits. He did not walk 1. He struck out 8, which was really nice to see. He's not been a big strikeout guy so far at this level. He did allow 2 earned runs, but this was a really well-pitched game. I went and watched the whole game. It was really nice to see some of the swing and miss show up. He was mixing in the 2-seam, which is, it's a sinker, really. It's a sinker that gets a ton of grounders. And the 4-seam a little bit more in this one from what I saw, which he can ramp up the velo on that and get up to like 93 with the 4-seam, where he's more like 88 to 90, 91 with the sinker. The changeup's a really good pitch for him as well. He uses it a lot, way more than most young pitchers use a changeup. And then I think he calls it a slider, but the way it moves, it looks very curveballish to me. I just saw him signal in a slider when he was warming up. But either way, the stuff is interesting, and the command has been very, very good. I mean, he's hitting spots. He's not just avoiding walks. He's hitting spots with this stuff. So if the velo can tick up a little bit, I think he's going to be one that is very interesting to follow. And then I'm going to finish with Tyson Harden. Earlier this week, he had a 7-inning complete game shutout. Again, this was a doubleheader like Hernandez's was. He only allowed 2 hits. He didn't walk anyone, and he struck out 6 in that one. That brought his season tally to 38 2/3, a 1.16 ERA, a 2.45 FIP, and a 40-4 strikeout to walk ratio. He followed that up tonight with 6 innings of 1 earned run, 6 hits, no walks, and 8 strikeouts. So that brings it to 48-4 on the strikeout to walk ratio. He needs to be in Biloxi. I mean, this is not a challenge for him. High A is not a challenge for him at all. He is dominating the level. He went 6 innings and gave up 1 earned run today, and his ERA went up. So he's too good for this level. The 4-seam is really, really good. He's been up to 97 with it. He's sitting 93 to 95, still touching 95 in his 6th and 7th innings. The sweeper is a really good pitch. His cutter is a good pitch. I think the changeup's not bad, and his main fastball in college was a 2-seam. He still mixes in a 2-seam. But yeah, it's a 5-pitch mix. He's holding velo despite being a reliever in college. The command has been really good, obviously, with only 4 walks so far. I think this is a very legitimate pitching prospect that is on the verge of potentially blowing up. If he goes to Biloxi and performs the rest of this year, even at a solid level, I think he's a guy that you might have to start looking at as almost like a top 10 prospect in the organization. So that'll wrap up this minor league sandbox. Long episode as well. But we had to talk about Murph and his bullpen management a lot. So we got through it. I'm glad we didn't wait out the entire rain delay. Like I was considering telling you we should do that. And I am very glad I did not do that, because we would have been going till 1, maybe 1:30 a.m. So I'm glad we're not doing that.
I put the kibosh on that one pretty quickly. I said once the tarp came on, you texted me and I was like, well, I guess that means we just can't cover this game.
Yep.
So I was not going to let it wait that late. But if you made it this far, all the way through, actually, a nearly 2-hour episode, you can pat yourself on the back for that, because that's pretty impressive to sit and listen to us talk for that long. If you want to listen to us talk some more, you can listen to us talk next week for our Friday release. We'll see what else the Brewers are up to in the meantime. But until then, thank you for listening to the Brewer Fanatic podcast.